Hello, folks. My name is Charles Peterson, and we're in the book of James doing a verse by verse study. We're in chapter 1. So, this is the third installment in that. So, we're going to start with verse number 11, James 1, verse 11. For the sun is no sooner risen with a burning heat, but it withereth the grass, and the flower thereof falleth, and the grace of the fashion of it perisheth. So also shall the rich man fade away in his ways. Now, James directed this particular passage at the rich. But one thing can sure be said, our lives are very short. It doesn't matter if you're rich, you're poor, you're sick, you're broken, diseased. This soon shall pass, that's for sure. Because our lives just come and go so fast. And when you compare it with eternity, we're just like a very small speck concerning eternity. After man sinned, we live now in today's age, average lifespan 75 to 80 years. And in that time, we're charged with doing the best we can and doing the most that we can for the cause of Christ. And that should be our goal. And what James is doing is making this comparison to grass and burning heat. And he's touching on a thing, something's wrong with the world. If you notice, if you look around, things are not right. And they haven't been right. The world we now live in, and the way that things happen, where there's disease and dying, and everything's running down, so to speak. And in thermodynamics, the second law of thermodynamics speaks of this very thing. And they've actually tied this very principle, which is called entropy, to time. Because if you notice, time seems to be flowing forward. Okay? But there's no laws in any of our laws scientifically that say it has to point forward. But the only thing that makes it do that, scientists say, is entropy. And entropy is basically the whole world is in a state of degradation. A good example of this, for instance, entropy can be described or explained as this. When you buy a brand new car, when it comes out of the showroom, not the showroom, but off the assembly line, that's the best condition that vehicle will ever be in, because it was just assembled. Same with the baby. When the baby comes out, it's got some growing to do, but that's the best physical state that it could be in, so to speak. Of course, it grows to maturity, and then it's downhill from there. But back to the car, that car will never again be in this condition. It will sit out in the sun, it'll fade, people will drive it, things will break on it, things will stop working. Of course, they can be repaired, but it'll never be back to its very new original condition unless you replace it all. That is what entropy is. And entropy basically started after the sin of man. Because prior to that, we lived in a whole different reality. The reality that Adam and Eve lived in prior to sin was perfect. It was the perfect environment for them to thrive in. There was no death. There was no disease. He didn't kill animals and eat them. He ate fruit. There were no thorns and thistles, storms, hurricanes, snowstorms, mudslides, all of that. None of that happened. Because the way scientists explain it, or scholars, they say that the earth was watered by a canopy around it. So we were living in like this tropical paradise where everything stayed the same and everything prospered. Nothing died. Adam tended to the garden. What does that mean? I don't know. I guess it means getting all the extra fruit out so that more fruit could grow. I don't know what it means. But I can promise you this. He didn't work by the sweat of his brow. But the moment that he sinned, that brought in this principle known as entropy. The whole world became an alternate universe. And it's like everything is fighting everything. Natural disasters started, floods, rains, thorns, thistles. Adam no longer had a life of cake in the garden. He actually had to work for a living. And it was hard. It was difficult. It took hours and hours and hours, just as it does today, for us to make a living. Well, he didn't make a living back then, but he had to go out and make his own way because he got tossed out of the garden. And the reason he got tossed out of the garden was to keep him from eating from the tree of life. Because if, in a fallen state, if he ate of this tree, then he would be forever suspended, eternally suspended in the fallen state. That's not what God wanted. So God put angels to guard the entrance of Eden so that him and Eve or any of the descendants could not eat of the fruit that would make them eternal. To this day, Eden, the garden, has not been found. And it won't be found because contained therein is what? The tree of life. So if we make ourselves immortal in an evil state, there's no chance at redemption. There's also no chance at punishment for not accepting Jesus Christ. So we're talking about the sun is no sooner risen with a burning heat, and it withereth the grass. In Adam's day, the grass didn't withereth. But now, everything withereth. Us, we get old. Time flows. I don't care what scientists say. They don't believe it flows in a direction. It's just an illusion that it's flowing. And it's tied to entropy. Well, entropy came from God because it was part of the curse. You will now, the day Adam and Eve ate of the forbidden fruit in the garden, they began to die. That was the day that sin, sickness, and disease began being hatched in our world. And now, 2,000, 4,000 years later, 6,000 years later total, somewhere around then, I believe in a young earth, 6 to 10,000 years, I believe it's closer to 6, maybe 7, that cancer and diseases and strains of viruses that antibiotics can't even cure now, these viruses and diseases have become smarter than the drugs we have because God made it like that. He doesn't want to allow doctors to help us live forever because we're not here to live forever. We're seeds. This body that we live in is simply an outer shell. Within it is the seed that God hopes to harvest and give us glorified bodies later. So James is telling the rich that, you know, you might be rich right now and you might have your riches all your life, but someday you're going to face eternity. And when you face eternity, it's going to matter what you did on earth with those riches.